When I talk about the characters, I'm talking about the characters in the show for anyone listening. I feel like Tony and Vivian are dating, and so, like, Vivian's like, oh, come on, Tony. You know, kind of like doing that girlfriend thing, like, oh, come on, do this with me. And him being the supportive boyfriend.
Thank God you brought that up, because I could not be the only kid that thought that they were a couple. I honestly thought that they were a couple when...
I mean, why do you think Vivian's always introducing Tony as her friend? Hi, I'm Vivian,
Right?
and this is my friend, Tony.
Yeah, sure.
Your boyfriend. Hello everyone, welcome to an episode of The Box Cutter, where we take apart an episode of Disney's Out of the Box to see if it still holds up. My name is Daniel, and my co-host for today is a fan of the show and a fan of this podcast, Teresa Logsden. How are you doing today?
I'm great, Daniel, and how are you?
I am doing good. First things first, I appreciate you being such a big fan of the podcast that, you reached out to me and you asked, well, where are the episodes? And, this is a passion project, and sometimes, I have to put other priorities, ahead of it. But, I was like, well, you really seem to believe in me. So I really love to return the favor by having you on, so that way we can discuss, the podcast. But besides that, with COVID, we're in the midst of COVID, and it's always good to try and find new things to experiment with and try. And even if it's not something, we're necessarily good at, or if we are really good at it, well, now we know that either we're good at it or we're not good at it. So, what's something that you've tried that's new that during this time?
I have tried reading more and getting outside. I've tried bird watching.
Reading. I always say this. I get so jealous of people who like to read as like something fun that they do. And I've always wanted to try it, but I just get so bored with it, because it's like I read it and then I read and I'm like, what did I just read? So then I read the same page again. What did I just read? So I end up reading the same thing over and over again. So, great on you for taking up reading. So out of the box, what would you say is your personal experience? Like, how would you say, what do you enjoy about the show, and how has that shaped the way you grew up to be?
Like, I just love the chemistry between Tony and Viv and the kids, and how they all work together. And the show has inspired me to go on to stage, because I was in the school plays when I was in high school, and I did choir and all of that. So I like to credit the show for that.
You were speaking to me a little bit earlier before we started, and you said that the first episode you remember watching is season 2's Revealing Feelings, correct? What exactly made it stand out to you, that episode exactly?
The way that the kids were talking about, like, how they were missing Tony, and just talking about their feelings, because I think kids today don't talk about their feelings as much as they did back then.
That's interesting, because I feel that in the day and age that we live in, we've learned to not necessarily put kids aside and just make sure they're quiet. We try and, check on them, because, people actually give notice and attention to mental health versus maybe 20 years ago, where that wasn't even, people would say, oh, you're being pretentious, it's all in your head, there's no such thing as mental health issues. But now 2020,
Right.
we've come so far that now it's like we try and make it so that way kids grow up better than what we used to. But also, I feel like sometimes we get a little jealous of that. We make it a little too easy for them. But isn't that kind of the point where we're not supposed to make them traumatized by, getting their spanked or anything like that?
Yeah.
Rewatching the show, like when it came back to Disney Plus, what were your feelings like finding out that it was back on Disney Plus?
I was super excited. Like, I started screaming. I was like, this was one of my favorite, like, all time favorite shows. And I have been binge watching it since Disney Plus came out, actually.
I'm sure I heard it, and it's such a tired story now, but I saw it, and I just was so overwhelmed. It was like a memory in the back of my head, because no one I know ever even knows, like, the show existed besides my older sister. And it's like, everyone's like, what are you talking about? So I never talk about it, but now I'm just like, it's on Disney Plus. I
Yeah.
remember the
I
show.
remember actually my sister, when she was younger, I had to explain to her the show because she would be like, "Oh, what's that? What's that? What's that?"
Yeah, I was actually the opposite way, where I, found this show first, and then I was like, oh, come watch it with me, Maria. And, you know, it's like the one thing that is like special to my relationship with my sister. So I'm glad you have that special thing with your sister to relate to. So, today's episode we are talking about is Ships Ahoy. So, do you have any knowledge of, boats or the ocean or ships or anything like that?
I do actually. You know that Kentucky's known for the Derby, right?
And chicken.
And chicken too. So we have this event called the Great Steamboat Races.
Really?
So yeah. So it would be one ship racing against the other one
Mm-hmm.
crossing the Ohio River.
Oh,
And I
okay.
remember when I was in 8th grade and in high school, we took field, a field trip on a boat.
Was it a steamboat, sailboat?
Steamboat.
Did it look bigger on the inside than it did when you were looking at it from the outside, or was it really big, just off the bat?
It was like really big on the inside than it was on the
Mm-hmm.
outside.
Well, I don't want to keep stalling, even though I'm not stalling. But let's go ahead and talk about the episode of Ships Ahoy. So the episode starts with Tony in the clubhouse with some plastic bottles, and he does the age-old kindergarten experiment of what would happen if I blow into two equal-sized bottles, and what would happen if I start pouring water into one. And for me, I don't hear any difference. I don't even hear the bottle. It's like, and I'm like,
Right.
how do you know this one's higher? I can't hear it. So yeah,
They just sounded the same to me.
so he poses the question of, oh, what would happen if I start to pour water into one? I'm like, well, I don't know. Maybe it starts to sound deeper because it has, weight to it. I don't know. So he puts the funnel in on the top of the bottle, and it's like he's holding it. Where I'm like, why is he holding it like that? Most people I know hold it from the outside, not from the mouth of it.
But right.
And then and then he starts to pour it, and I'm like, oh, okay, he's purposely trying to get his hands wet. And then he gets the camera all wet. So after he pours it, he shows us that when you pour water into bottle, the tone gets higher. And then, to end off his little experiment, he shows a smaller bottle. And he says, well, what do you think this will sound like? Well, it's obviously going to be higher. But I don't
Right?
understand why my brain wasn't thinking, oh, there's less air in the container when you put water in there, so it's gonna sound higher. I just thought, oh, it's gonna be deeper because now it's heavier. I don't know. I study human resources. I'm not I'm not a physics or science person, so. He shows us that it's lighter, and then he starts to play with the bottles. After he's done performing, they give him a round of applause, and so Dane, Cece, and Brandon go over to Tony and ask to see the bottles. And it's an interesting combination, Dane, Cece, and Brandon, I feel, because you
They
never
were in
see them
Tubetown
together.
together, right?
Yeah, they were in Tubetown together. Because I was like, I feel like they haven't done this combo before, but they have. Where is it again? But in Tubetown, I feel they were a lot better. This episode, I feel it was okay. But so yeah, so they play with the bottles, and then they show Dane's snow globe. Is it a snow globe? I'm gonna call it a snow globe.
That's what it looked like to me.
Yeah, it was a really cool looking one because it was a cube, and like you don't shake it. It was like the thing that moved where it was like the water and like the sailboat on the inside, and I've never seen one like that before.
I actually did own one of those when I was growing up, actually.
Oh, did you? So like,
Yeah.
was it the water that moved or was it just the boat that moved?
The water, mainly.
Oh, the water mainly. So it had like the island in the corner, and then you had like the blue water, and then like the sailboat rocking back and forth on it. But I was just like, how is the thing rocking back and forth but not moving around in the globe? Is what was like just. I was just curious about that. He shows it, and then Cece.
She says, "Look, I can make it go to the little island."
Oh, of course she does. That is so her. Scene stealer. Miss Cece Scene stealer.
She was my favorite girl. Well, my second favorite girl.
Well, I think she's everyone's favorite girl in season 1. She's got that spunk, but not Alicia's spunk.
Yeah.
So she shows off that she can make it go to the island, and then they start to look for things that either sink or float. Another great kindergarten experiment of, oh, look around your house, fill up a tub, and see what sinks or floats. And, they get the idea because Cece starts talking about, oh, hey, this bottle sounds like a toy boat that I have for my bath. And then Vivian asks her, well, what else do you put in your bath? And she's like, oh, soap, shampoo bottles, other stuff, to see what floats. And so Brandon asks Tony if they can do the same thing. So they look around the clubhouse, and they find all sorts of things to see if it sinks or floats. So they bring it to this, like, pretty big plastic tub. Brandon gets a rock. Him being 5 years old. And he's like, oh. He's tall for 5. He is very tall because he was born in December. So I was like, So I was doing the math. I was like, how is it that he said that he's 5, but he was born in this year? And it's because he was born in December. That's why he kept saying he was 5. He's super tall for 5.
He is.
Because it's like he's just as tall as Cece and Jane. And he's like up to Vivian's shoulder. And I don't know how tall Vivian is. Maybe she's 5 foot. Maybe she's like 5'3". I'm not sure. But he's already up to like her shoulder. So, so he gets a rock and they see if it sinks or floats. And it sinks. And Dane has some corks. I've never seen corks lying around. Like, I don't see him at Michael's. I don't see him at, Walmart or any of those stores.
The only place I've ever seen corks is like when you go to open like wine bottles. Champagne.
Yeah. maybe, I don't know. Maybe they have like small little arts and crafts shops, like little mom and pop shops. They got the hookup. They got the illegal Cork arts and crafts ring going on. Where it's like, yeah, this is a 500 count of Italian corks. Oh, you want the 200 count of French corks? Nah, you're gonna have to pay me an extra 100 for that. I just imagine that. Because you never see corks anywhere. Like, I guess maybe 20 years ago. 20 years ago, maybe.
Yeah.
But not now. So they do that, and they see how the cork is floating, which reminds them of a boat. And so Vivian gets an idea of what you can do with the cork.
It's arts and crafts time.
So the arts and crafts for this episode, it's always weird to go out of order with this. It's always music time,
Right.
then arts and crafts time, then music time again, then story time, and we leave. But this time, we start with the arts and crafts. So the arts and crafts for today is they make cork boats. So they get 2 corks, 3 toothpicks, and a strip of construction paper.
I've never known anybody to carry around toothpicks.
Well, I mean, they're pretty easy to find, but at first I was like, isn't this dangerous to just start sticking, what if they poke it a little too much and they, could stab their hand? And I work with grade schoolers, the Cork Boats. They get 2 corks and they get 2 toothpicks and they stab them on each end to make like a frame. And then I was like, well, how is this a boat? So then they get the 3rd toothpick.
It looks like a raft.
Yeah, it looks like a raft. Oh, and then after Vivian stabs the corks the toothpicks through the corks, she's like, oh, but be careful because they're sharp. I'm like, you could have told us this before.
Exactly.
Before we started. Before you start, make sure you get either your mom and dad to help you put the toothpicks into the corks. Could have said that.
As with little kids, they'll
start putting it in their
cut
mouth.
themselves.
They'll start poking each other
too.
with it. So they make a raft frame, and then they poke another toothpick on there, and then they stab the strip through the toothpick, and they have like the open little point at the top of the thing, and I'm just like, this is dangerous. This is dangerous. I know they're little toothpicks, but if you have a 5-year-old or a 4-year-old, they're very tempted to play with it. Stick it in their ear, poke themselves with it, put it in their mouths. Mr. Douglas Love, I appreciate your creativity and your effort to help promote creativity within the young ones, but very dangerous. You gotta have a quality assurance team when you do a reboot of this show, if they ever ask you for a reboot.
Right.
So they put it into the water, and they see how it floats, and then Vivian gives them some straws to help blow it along, and it was kind of a blunder, because they're like all blowing it in different directions, and then it just ends up in the corner. So, like, they just cut away to Tony, and he's like, oh, I know a song that's like this, and it's basically row, row, row your boat, but instead it's like, blow, blow, blow your boat, or something like that. And I'm just like, this is corny. Even as a little kid, I'd be like, this is kind of lame, because it's like, why don't you just sing row, row, row your boat, versus blow, blow, blow.
I thought it was cute. Like a cute little scene.
I don't know. I thought the lyrics were very like as if a middle schooler wrote them for some reason. I just think like back when I used to write songs in middle school, that's how corny the lyrics were. They'd be like, oh, our boy, our boat is neat. I'm just like, what? You're trying to force it in there. They do that, and then after that, What do they do after that, Teresa?
Cece says, "Wouldn't it be fun to go on a real boat?"
And so that reminds Vivian of a picture she had. A nice illustration of a pirate captain, on steering their ship. And so they jump into the picture.
Let's jump into the picture and see what we can see. It's time to go exploring. Jump on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3, jump!
And they run into a pirate captain named Captain Heartily. And again, we have this idea of pirates, and like they're like, rough and tough, and not necessarily the nicest looking people, but
An eye patch.
and an eye patch. But I'm kind of fascinated of how they made this pirate not so stereotypical. They made him out to be like more like a seafarer, like a voyager, like more of like
Right.
a experienced like sea captain, not necessarily a pirate. Is how they maybe because I guess they've done test screenings, and they're like, oh, well, the pirate's a little too scary, so maybe it was that. So they run into Captain Heartily, and he talks about his boat, the SS Hardy Harg.
I thought I just didn't like it.
You didn't like it?
I did not. No, like I thought it had too many speaking parts from kids.
Too many speaking parts for the kids?
Yeah. Because
Well-
you had the captain singing, and then you had Vivian, and then like the kids spoke their parts.
Do you mean like they sounded like they were reading the script?
Yeah, it sounded like they were
Oh.
reading script.
Yeah, it kind of did. So Captain Heartily explains to them, ships, they always say that they're she's, and, they have sails, and you always have to wear a life vest when you're on them, which I like the fact that they point out, hey, when you go on a boat, make sure you have a life vest on. He explains to them, things like terminology, like the poop deck, which is the back end of the ship. He explains what flags mean. He says, the checkered one is no, but that's not true. It just means the letter N. And then another one that says yes, but that's the letter C. And so, because I was like, is that really what they mean? I thought they were for something else. So so it turns out that the flags he was holding were just letters. They weren't yes or no. They were just letters.
Yeah.
And so then he puts them to work. Child labor. You can't put them to work.
Child labor. Yeah. I just found that scene a little odd.
Yeah, I was like, well, I mean, they don't have to swab the deck. I mean, they could just help you hoist the sail, but, now you're just milking it for all it's worth now, aren't you? So he has them swabbing the deck and pulling up the sails, and the ship's rocking back and forth, and then he just decides to break out into song for some reason.
It's music time.
Yeah.
So, the song, Rocking on the Deep Blue Sea, that's a good name. So they're singing, and it's okay. Most of the singing is done by Captain Heartily, and you have some speaking parts for the kids, and they're talking about, the ship rocking back and forth, and saying ahoy, and aye aye captain, and all that. And it was cute, but it was decent, I'd say, in terms of all the songs that they've done in season 1. I'd say it's okay.
Well, don't they usually do the first song with Tony?
They do. They usually do the first song with Tony, but this time it was probably I gotta clean up all this mess. Brandon almost knocked over one of the boxes holding up the tub. So I gotta get rid of this water. He probably went to go water the garden while they were out. Because it's always Vivian that takes them to jump in the picture. But it's never Tony. Maybe Tony's like the one that cleans up and Vivian's the one with the magical powers.
Well, I was listening to one of your episodes and you said that you didn't like them jumping into pictures.
Well, yeah, because it's like, it was such a trend in like that time. You know, Blue's Clues did it, so not everyone has to jump into a picture. And it's like...
Yeah, 2 years later, box.
I don't know. I just feel like they could have just like pretended. It's like, oh, let's all pretend that we're inside that picture. And then in the, you know, you get some pixelated graphics of like the scene changing. That would have been more interesting.
Oh, yes.
So like they're just closing their eyes and like the scene, like, you know, it starts to pixelate into a different like setting. And then there you go. That would have been more interesting. And it would have made a lot more sense. It's like, oh, okay, no one can jump into pictures. But I'm not sorry to break it to everybody. But you can't jump into a picture. You can get lost in a picture, sure. But you can't physically jump in it. Which makes me believe, and it further suspects, that Tony and Vivian are magic users who use Alicia and Nick to lure other, you know, young magic users into their clutches. And then every year they sacrifice them so that way they stay young and keep their powers. That's my creepypasta. As to why they always replace the cast. Except for Alicia and Nick. That's why we only see Alicia and Nick for 3 seasons. Dane was like, I don't want to do this anymore. So then they sacrifice him in season 2. So after that, they get back to the box. And Vivian is the one to explain to Tony what they were doing versus the kids. It's like, oh, we met Captain and he taught us all about the ship. And then the kids start to talk to Tony after like 2 minutes. Versus like usually when they jump out of the picture, they start telling Tony of all the exciting things that happen. So they're like, oh yeah, the boat to she, and there's poop deck, and, you know, you wear life vests on the boat and all that. So that inspires the kids to want to make their own boat. So they get like a few pieces of cardboard panels and some cardboard tubing, and they make a rowboat. So Dane, being Dane, like, oh, I want to be captain because I'm the oldest. And then they're just, you know, Cece and Brandon are like, nah, that's not fair. We want to be captain too. So they decide to name their boat the 3 Captains. And so they dress up and they decide to make a story out of for their new boat.
It's story time.
So the story is Captain Hook and the 3 Captains. I felt it was pretty interesting because it's like we don't get into the story right away. It was like they're just, you know, playing around with their boat, you know, pretending like they're on the ocean and rocking back and forth. And then they get swept up by some ocean waves. And they end up stuck. And then that's when the story starts. Because then they end up stuck on an island. Trying to rescue Captain Hook. At first, Dane was like, oh, let's go rescue Captain Hook. And Brandon's like, okay, aye. And then he's like, well, wait. Captain Hook's a bad guy. He was mean to Peter Pan. I was like, well, which is it, Brandon? Which is it? Are you going to go rescue him or not?
I thought Brandon was so savvy in that scene. I just thought, well, you know, kids being kids, he was just like over hyper.
Well, he did mention he has I think it was ADD. So, with him being 5 and him having ADD, you know,
right.
He had the greatest potential to be,
I think he might be my favorite boy now.
Brandon's favorite boy confirmed. Yeah, he's like, but wait, we can't go rescue him because Brandon's like not convinced to rescue Peter Pan, and neither is Cece. But then Dane brings up a good point. He's been on that island for 19 years, and people change. So why not see if we can, he probably misses his mom. So they get stuck on the island trying to go over there. And then they are like, well, how are we going to get back? We have our boat, but we don't have our oars. So they just run into, Captain Hook. It's like, oh, there you are. It's like, there's no setup to it. It's just like, oh, hey there. I'm Captain Hook. I really miss my mom. Oh, we're stuck on this island too. But we have a boat. Oh, well, I have my sail. So why don't we just all join forces and get out of here? So that's pretty much it. And then they go from being the 3 captains to the 4 captains. It's not a bad story. Like Miss Tater had a gator. Oh, that's never... Nothing worse than that story from Dr. Octor. But this story was not the best, but it was like lower end of the middle, is how I feel.
I actually liked the story.
Mm-hmm.
But calling back to High Flyers, where was Captain Hook in that story?
Well, it was the story about Peter Pan. It wasn't about Peter Pan and Captain Hook. It was just, Peter Pan, he's flying. But, I mean, I like the fact that they acknowledge that Captain Hook is a person. He's his own character away from Peter Pan. It's not like he has to have Peter Pan with him all the time. So, I like the fact that they acknowledge that he's his own character. He doesn't need to be stuck with Peter Pan.
Yeah, I actually like the story. It was probably one of the better stories that they have done.
Mm-hmm.
Because it shows Captain Hook, like, having feelings.
That is true. It does show him, having feelings, saying like, oh, I miss my mom.
And how they all worked together to get off the island.
Mm-hmm. I mean, wouldn't it have been so funny if Captain Hook was like, oh, let's all work together, and then he ends up still being bad and just steal their boat. He's like, oh, well, I get the boat ready. Why don't you guys help me get my stuff, or help me find my parrot? And while they're looking for the parrot, he tries to make off with the boat, and then they catch him. And then he's like, oh, I just really miss my mom. That could have been a thing. He could have acknowledged that he did something bad, and then he could have, fixed his bad mistake. So, after that, Tony just decides to, while they're, saying their story, he's like, oh, let's sing a song.
It's music time.
That's all. They're like, no, oh, I know a song that we can sing. So we'll call this song There's Room for Many and More. Or Get On Board. There we go. We can call it Get On Board. Alright, so the song, I'd say it's the catchier one. Because I'm still singing it, the chorus. Get on board, everybody. Get on board, everyone. Yep. So it's fun. It's catchy. I like the beat to it. It's very like low budget VHS, but not in a bad way. I'd say. Douglas Love, he had some pretty good music writers. He had Billy Strauss and Peter Lurie were the 2 main songwriters for season 1. I mean, with the digital keyboards and all that, these songs that they write are pretty catchy. So, yeah, they sing about, sailing and their boat and rocking back and forth and all that. It's a fun song, and I like that at the end they sail away, but then Brandon forgets, Brandon being Brandon. That's my expression. Brandon being Brandon.
Yeah.
Forgets the little cardboard panel, and then he goes back to get it. I'm like, that is so Brandon. It's 100% authentic Brandon. I love it. So yeah, they finished the day, talking about, their favorite part of I like that I was the poop duck, just like Captain Hartley. I like that, we rocked back and forth in the boat and all that. And Vivian says, well, we got one more long trip home. The way home. Get out. She doesn't say get out, but I'm pretty sure she's thinking it. Get out.
I've had you for 20 minutes, get out.
It seems like 20 minutes, but I don't think it was 20 minutes. I always talk about that. It's a 20-minute show, but I feel like their parents dropped them off in the morning, and by lunchtime, their parents pick them up. Seems like that. So yeah, Vivian takes the kids home, and Tony talks about, adventuring and, how fun it is to imagine, sailing and going, adventuring and if all you need is a little imagination and, where would you go if you could? And that was Ships Ahoy. So let's go ahead and talk about the characters then. Who would you say is your standout in both the good way and a not good way? Who would you say was the strongest performer out of the kids?
Out of the kids, I have to go with my girl Cece.
All right, and who would you say is like the weakest link out of the three?
The weakest link, Dane.
Yeah, I would say my standout performer would be Brandon. I'd have to agree with you that the one that blended into the background the most would probably be Dane. And I don't want to badmouth him, but at the same time I'm just like the extent of his personality is he is an artist and
right.
He seems kind of like a know-it-all. That's the impression I get from the way he acts, is that his character in the show is kind of a know-it-all.
Right.
But also it's like, he's too safe. Like, he doesn't go out of the line. If you, like, he doesn't color outside the lines. That's
right.
What, if you get my expression. It's like, he says it the way it's supposed to be said. He does it the way it's supposed to be done. And it's like that. It's just so safe that it makes him blend in with the, with everybody, that you forget that he's there. Like, whenever I used to talk about, oh, what do you think of this person? What do you think of that person? When I first started the show, every time I brought up Dane, everyone would be like, oh, that's right, Dane was in this episode. So, but also, I have to give note to Cece. I feel like this was probably her weakest performance for me, because it's like, she didn't have that usual energy she had, like, in Seeds of Imagination. She's really,
right.
like, an active participant.
She was blocking Matt's face.
I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of pissed, because Matt's the homeboy. Matt's the homie. He's the homeboy. He's that kid that everyone thinks is cool, and for no reason. He just comes off that way.
Shall we rate Tony and Viv's?
Yeah, I'd say Tony for me, he's not the lead. He's the support most of the time. But I feel like, again, he just didn't do enough to, be relevant in the episode. But I feel like he, like, I don't know, I just feel like, again, potential. I always bring that word up. I feel like I feel like they could have given Tony more to do. Because I feel like, oh, he does the heavy lifting and he does the music and that's it. But I feel like he could have done a lot more besides, pour water and play drums. I feel like he could have narrated the story, but Vivian was the one to.
But he was making the sound effects.
I feel like he could have done both. I feel like he could have but just then a storm started brewing, getting loud, and then going back to normal and all that. Because he's a really good storyteller. He's a really good storyteller, and I feel like he could have done this. And he just comes off so mellow, and my interview with Brandy, he's like, oh, he just seemed like the coolest guy. So, Vivian, she was a lot more relaxed this episode. She wasn't so hyper and energetic, and had her shoulders raised and her nose scrunched. She wasn't like that this episode. She was a lot more relaxed and mellow and going with the flow. But I feel like even though I joke about her energy all the time, I feel like that kind of played against her mellowness, because it's she was okay. That's pretty much all I have to say. That she was okay. So our standouts this episode, with our standout awards, the Boxies go to Brandon and Cece this episode. And our Cut Up Award goes to Dane. So, congratulations, everyone. So, let's get to our verdict, shall we? So, let's go ahead and talk about the theme. The theme of ships and sailing. I'd say it was presented okay. I mean, they brought up good points of, life vests and, making it exciting, rocking back and forth on a boat, and how a boat works, pulling the sail, and, all these flags. I like the segment where they jump into the picture and they explain how, things on a boat. Oh, this is a poop deck. This is what these flags mean. You say aye aye, and you say ahoy, and all that stuff. So I'd say, for me, the theme stands out. What about you?
I think so. Because who wouldn't love to go sailing and pretend to be a pirate?
Mm-hmm. I mean, they could have gone the other direction where the pirate held him for, held him up. They jump into the picture, and then they get surrounded by a pirate and his pirate crew. And they get tied up.
And then Tony has to save them.
Yeah, Tony jumps in, and he saves them by doing a game of rock, paper, scissors. There you go. That could have been exciting. Instead of the main conflict just being, oh, I want to be captain. Oh, that's not fair. I want to be captain. That's as far as a problem as they had on this episode.
Don't they? I've seen them bicker, so it's not just in this episode.
Yeah, I like the fact that they bicker. It gives it more dimension versus Barney, where everyone gets along and there's no conflict at all. Like
Barney.
Yeah.
Everything's all
peaches and cream and all that stuff. So the music this episode, I'd say the music is catchy. I feel like it's something people still sing. I'm still thinking of the lyrics and singing them to myself every now and again. I
actually have a playlist dedicated to songs from the show, and whenever I'm
so do I. And same thing. I get stressed out, and I play the playlist, and I do the dances. I'm like, let's ride inside a rocket to the Milky Way, or I go wheels around. From the front, they're skinny.
They're skinny.
They got a hole in the middle, and they roll. And they roll. Music overall, I'd say, stands out for this episode. The arts and crafts, just an absolute no. The way it was presented, I'd say it does not hold up.
No. I would agree with you on that one.
The story, I would say the story, I don't know, it was okay. I like that they did the rocking back and forth. It's kind of like a an interactive element to the story, because not all the stories have something interactive with them, so I like that at least. But I just don't like how everything just wrapped up of like, oh, we see Captain Hook. Hey, let's all work together so that way we can get home. So it just felt rushed. The ending for that story felt rushed. But yeah, I'd say besides that, I'd say the story holds up, and I feel like it keep a kid's attention.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the story would hold up and keep a kid's attention.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, it shows teamwork.
It does. I did not think of that. It does show them working together. It's a very good point. And the overall performance of everyone this episode, I'd say it's okay. Not the best. Not the worst.
I thought it was solid.
It was just right in the middle.
The overall acting from everybody, I think it would hold up.
Mm-hmm. So overall though, Ships Ahoy still holds up. So Teresa, I appreciate you, making time for the show, and I appreciate you being a fan of the show, and reaching out to me, because I love hearing from you guys. And yeah, any last thoughts?
If you have kids, watch it. You'll like it.
Make sure to leave a comment if you like what you hear. Go ahead and subscribe. I'm on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, and YouTube as the Box Cutter Podcast. Send all feedback and comments to the boxcutterpodcast@gmail.com, because it takes a village to raise something beautiful. In the words of Tony and Vivian, so long, farewell, until we meet again.